She thought her best friend was helping her plan the happiest day of her life. From choosing the dress, to fixing her hair, to standing beside her at the altar. But while everyone else saw loyalty, they didn't see the lingering touches, the secret glances, or the smiles that didn't reach the eyes. Tonight, instead of stepping into her forever, she was walking straight into a betrayal designed by the two people she trusted most. The champagne towers sparkled under crystal chandeliers as Lagos society watched Adanna Nwosu become Mrs. Okoye. Every detail screamed perfection. White roses imported from Ecuador, a 10-tier wedding cake that required structural engineering, and a guest list that read like Forbes' Africa's richest 100. Camera flashes erupted as Adanna descended the marble staircase of the Okoye family estate, her custom gown trailing behind her like liquid moonlight. This was supposed to be the beginning of forever. She had met Chidera Okoye at a political fundraiser 2 years ago, where his confidence had drawn her in like gravity. He was everything the magazine said: tall, commanding, with the kind of smile that made investors open their wallets and women forget their own names. But Adanna had seen something deeper that night, or so she thought. Beyond the tailored suits and boardroom swagger, she believed she'd found a man who valued substance over spectacle, who saw her as more than her father's political connections. How beautifully she had deceived herself. Now, standing at the altar with 500 pairs of eyes watching, Adanna poured her heart into vows she had written at 3 a.m, tears streaming down her face as she promised to love him through every storm, to build an empire of trust and partnership. Her voice trembled with sincerity. When Chidera recited his own vows, his delivery was flawless, practiced, the kind of performance that would make shareholders believe in a failing company. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of distraction whenever Lola moved in his peripheral vision. Lola, beautiful, sophisticated Lola, who had been Adanna's closest friend since university. Lola, with her Brazilian weaves and British accent, who had helped choose the wedding dress, who had organized the bachelorette party, who stood beside Adanna as maid of honor in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. Throughout the ceremony, Lola dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, playing the role of the emotional best friend to perfection. But Ngozi Okoye, Chidera's sharp-eyed sister, watched from the family pew with the intensity of someone reading a balance sheet for hidden losses. During the photo session, Lola insisted on adjusting Chidera's boutonniere multiple times, her fingers lingering on his chest with an intimacy that made several guests shift uncomfortably. When she presented Adanna with a surprise gift from the groom, a diamond bracelet that must have cost $40,000, Chidera's expression flashed with something like panic before he recovered with a smooth smile. The bracelet was exquisite, but Adanna had seen the jewelry receipts in their shared cloud storage, and this piece had never appeared on any list. Still, she smiled and thanked him, pushing down the uncomfortable question of where it had really come from. On her wedding day, she chose belief over suspicion. That choice would haunt her before midnight. The reception transformed the Okoye Gardens into an enchanted kingdom. Fairy lights strung between palm trees, live musicians playing Afrobeat fusion, tables groaning under the weight of jollof rice, asun, and platters of suya that perfumed the warm Lagos air. Politicians danced with oil executives, Nollywood celebrities posed for Instagram, and Chief Okoye himself gave a toast about family, legacy, and the strategic partnerships that build generational wealth. That last phrase should have been a warning, but Adanna was too busy floating through her fairy tale to decode the subtext. She danced with her father, who whispered that he was proud of her, that she had made a wise choice. The irony would cut deeper later. As midnight approached and guests began filtering out in their luxury vehicles, Adanna felt the pleasant exhaustion of a perfect day settling into her bones. Chidera had disappeared to see off some important business associates, and Lola had volunteered to help coordinate the departure logistics, ever the helpful friend. Adanna retreated to the master suite to change out of her wedding gown and into the silk honeymoon dress she had carefully selected. Champagne-colored, elegant, designed to transition from celebration to intimacy. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, the beginning of their real life together, away from cameras and crowds. Her phone sat on the lounge console where she had left it, and she remembered that her mother had wanted one final photo before leaving. Simple, innocent. She would just slip back downstairs quietly and retrieve it. The mansion had gone silent, most of the staff dismissed for the night. Only the hum of the central air conditioning filling the spaces between heartbeats. Adanna descended the curved staircase barefoot, her honeymoon dress whispering against marble, anticipating the surprise on Chidera's face when he saw her. The lounge doors were slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the darkened hallway. She heard a sound, a soft gasp, intimate and unmistakable. Curiosity pushed her forward before caution could intervene. What she saw through the gap in the doorway incinerated her fairy tale in a single devastating frame. Chidera and Lola, pressed together on the leather sofa where Adanna had sat just hours ago, greeting well-wishers. His hands tangled in Lola's hair, her dress unzipped to the waist, their bodies intertwined with the desperate passion of people who had been restraining themselves too long. This was not a momentary lapse. This was familiarity. This was routine. If you were in her shoes, what would you do? Comment below. The phone slipped from Adanna's hand and clattered against the marble, the sound exploding through the silence like a gunshot. They sprang apart, Chidera's expression cycling through shock, calculation, and something almost like relief, as if he was tired of pretending. Lola's face showed no shame, only a cold amusement that Adanna had never seen before, as if a mask had been ripped away to reveal the predator underneath. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Adanna felt her legs weaken, and she gripped the door frame to stay upright, her mind struggling to reconcile the impossible scene before her. "Adanna, wait. This isn't what it looks like," Chidera began, his voice taking on that smooth, persuasive tone he used in negotiations, already assembling lies like building blocks. But Lola laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was crystalline and cruel. She slowly zipped her dress back up with deliberate ease, as if she had all the time in the world. "Oh, please, Chidera. Stop insulting her intelligence. She has eyes." Lola turned to Adanna with a smile that belonged on a cobra. "Darling, you were never the bride. You were the business deal, the last piece in a very expensive puzzle. Your father's political connections secured a 3 billion naira infrastructure contract for the Okoye Empire. The wedding was just the signature on the paperwork." The words hit like physical blows. Adanna staggered backward, her vision blurring with tears that she hated herself for crying. "How long?" she managed to whisper, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. "Since before he proposed to you," Lola said, examining her manicured nails as if discussing the weather. "Actually, I suggested the marriage strategy. You were so perfect, sweet, trusting, politically connected, naive enough to believe in love. We played you beautifully, didn't we? The plan was always to secure the contract through the marriage, build the public image for about a year, then create a scandal that would make you the villain so Chidera could divorce you and still keep everything. I would step in as the supportive new partner, and your father would be too embarrassed by the tabloid stories to retaliate. Clean, profitable, efficient." Chidera had the decency to look uncomfortable now, but he didn't contradict her. That silence confirmed everything. Adanna felt something inside her chest crack open, not just her heart, but her entire understanding of reality. Every moment, the romantic proposal at Zanzibar, the handwritten love letters, the late-night conversations about building a family, all of it had been performance art. She had been an investment opportunity, not a partner. The humiliation was almost worse than the betrayal. "You disgust me," Adanna said quietly, her voice steadier than she expected. "Both of you?" She turned to leave, but the lounge door swung fully open, and Ngozi stepped inside, her expression carved from stone. "I wouldn't leave just yet, Adanna. You'll want to hear this." She held up her phone and pressed play on a voice recording. Lola's voice filled the room, dripping with malice from a conversation that must have been weeks old. "The poor thing is so in love, she can't see straight. After we destroy her reputation, she'll be too broken to fight back. Chidera gets her father's political capital, I get Chidera, and she gets nothing. It's almost too easy. Do you believe karma is real? Type yes if you do." The color drained from Lola's face. Chidera stood frozen, his calculated composure finally shattering. Ngozi had been watching, listening, collecting evidence. "I've suspected for months," Ngozi said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "You two weren't as careful as you thought. I recorded 3 conversations, screenshots of text messages, photos of your meetings at the Transcorp Hilton when you thought nobody was watching. I have everything." Adanna felt the ground shift beneath her feet again, but this time in a different direction. Rage would have been easier, would have given her a target for the hurricane of emotions tearing through her chest. But rage was what they expected, an emotional explosion they could use against her later, proof of instability, ammunition for their planned character assassination. Instead, something cold and clear crystallized in her mind. She would not give them the satisfaction of her breakdown. Not here. Not now. Without another word, Adanna took Ngozi's phone, forwarded the recordings to her own device, and sent them directly to her father with a simple message. "We need to talk. Urgent." Then she walked out of the lounge, climbed the stairs to the master suite, locked the door, and collapsed onto the bed that was supposed to have been their honeymoon nest. Only then, alone, did she allow herself to shatter, sobbing into silk pillows, while her wedding makeup stained the fabric like bleeding watercolors. She didn't sleep. By dawn, her tears had dried into something harder, clearer. Her phone buzzed with a call from her father, Senator Nwosu, whose voice carried the dangerous calm of a man who had built his career on strategic warfare. "I've heard the recordings. I've also had a very interesting conversation with Chief Okoye. We're handling this. Get dressed. Board meeting at noon." The boardroom of Okoye Industries occupied the 35th floor of a glass tower that dominated Victoria Island's skyline, with panoramic views of Lagos that represented the kind of power only massive wealth could command. Adanna walked in, wearing a tailored black power suit, her hair pulled back severely, her face a mask of professional composure. The conference table was surrounded by executives who had attended her wedding 24 hours ago. Now they watched her with mixture of confusion and speculation. Chief Okoye sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Chidera sat to his right, looking like he hadn't slept either, his usual confidence replaced by uncertainty. Lola was conspicuously absent. Chief Okoye waited until everyone settled before speaking, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had built an empire from trading licenses and political connections. "Recent events have required immediate restructuring," he announced. "After reviewing business performance and strategic capabilities, I'm making several changes. Effective immediately, Adanna Okoye will join the board of directors as Executive Director of Strategic Partnerships. She will oversee all major contract negotiations and approve all executive travel and discretionary spending." He paused, letting the implications sink in. Chidera will report directly to her on all matters involving government contracts and stakeholder relations. The room went silent. Chidera's face cycled through shock, humiliation, and impotent rage. Several board members exchanged glances, processing the unprecedented power shift. Adanna's father had leverage that even the Okoye billions couldn't overcome: the infrastructure contracts, the political connections, the ability to make or break ventures that required government approval. Chief Okoye was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. He had calculated the cost of his son's betrayal and made a decision that prioritized empire over ego. Furthermore, Chief Okoye continued, his gaze locked on his son. Ms. Lola Adeyemi is permanently banned from all Okoye properties and business premises. Security has been notified. Any employee found communicating with her regarding company matters will face immediate termination. He turned to Adanna with something that might have been respect. Mrs. Okoye, your office is ready. I believe you have work to do. Over the following months, Adanna transformed from betrayed bride into boardroom force. She studied every contract, questioned every assumption, and brought fresh perspective that the company's old guard had been too comfortable to consider. Her first major project involved renegotiating terms with a Chinese manufacturing partner, securing better rates that saved the company 40 million naira. Employees who had initially viewed her as a diversity appointment or sympathy case quickly learned that she had inherited her father's political acumen and added her own innovative thinking. She was brilliant, and now she had a reason to prove it. Chidera, meanwhile, watched his empire of influence crumble. Colleagues who had once sought his approval now bypassed him to bring ideas directly to Adanna. His travel requests were denied with polite efficiency. His pet projects were subjected to scrutiny that revealed inefficiencies he had hidden behind charisma and his father's name. He began to see what he had destroyed, not just a marriage, but a genuine partner who could have made him better instead of simply propping up his ego. Regret tasted like ashes, but it was far too late. Lola's fall was steeper and more public. Desperate to salvage her social standing, she attempted to leak private text messages that she claimed showed Adanna's manipulation of the Okoye family. But Ngozi, who had become Adanna's fiercest ally, had been 3 steps ahead. She released the full context of Lola's recordings, along with evidence that Lola had attempted to blackmail 2 other wealthy families using similar seduction schemes. Lagos society, which worshipped success but punished public failure with savage glee, turned on her completely. Her boutique closed, her influencer sponsors dropped her. When she tried to attend a charity gala, security quietly escorted her out. She became a cautionary tale whispered at high society brunches, a name that made people uncomfortable. 6 months after the wedding, Adanna led the negotiation for a massive urban development project that every major construction firm in West Africa wanted. She spent 3 weeks in strategy sessions, studying environmental reports, understanding political stakeholders, building coalitions. When she presented the final proposal to the client, a government infrastructure committee, her presentation was so thorough, so politically astute, so clearly superior to competing bids that the contract was awarded to Okoye Industries within 48 hours. The deal was worth 6 billion naira and positioned the company as the dominant player in Nigerian infrastructure for the next decade. Chief Okoye called an emergency board meeting the day after the contract was finalized. When Adanna entered the conference room, the entire board stood and applauded, a gesture of respect usually reserved for retirement ceremonies and major milestone celebrations. Chief Okoye waited until the applause faded before speaking. "You saved this company. My son was the mistake. You were the blessing I didn't know we needed." He paused, then announced what even Adanna hadn't anticipated. "I'm naming you my successor. In 3 years, when I step down as chairman, you will take the position. Not because you're family by marriage, but because you've earned it." Chidera sat motionless, his face a study in devastation. This was the position he had been groomed for since childhood. The throne he had assumed was his birthright, and he had gambled it away for an affair with a woman who had never loved him, only what he represented. The poetic justice was almost too perfect. Good women deserve better. Comment strong to support Adanna. That evening, Adanna returned to the Okoye mansion. She had chosen to stay rather than run, reclaiming the space on her terms. She found Chidera waiting in the garden where they had danced at their wedding, surrounded by the fairy lights that had promised magic. He looked diminished somehow, smaller than the man who had swept her off her feet with rehearsed romance. When he saw her, he dropped to his knees, and the gesture would have been laughable if it wasn't so pathetic. "I destroyed everything," he said, his voice breaking. "I know you'll never forgive me, but I need you to know. I see it now. What I threw away, who you really are. I was an arrogant fool who thought love was weakness and strategy was strength. I'm begging you, Adanna, give me a chance to—" "No." The word was quiet, but absolute. Adanna looked down at him with eyes that held no hatred, no anger, only a clear-eyed certainty that came from knowing her worth. "Love is not blindness, Chidera, and nice women are not weak. You mistook my kindness for stupidity, my trust for naivety. I gave you something real, and you traded it for a performance. You don't get to rewrite that story now that it's inconvenient for you." She walked past him into the mansion, her heels clicking against stone, her spine straight, her future expanding before her like territory waiting to be conquered. Behind her, Chidera remained kneeling in the garden, surrounded by lights that no longer held any magic, finally understanding the cost of his choices. But Adanna didn't look back. She had boardrooms to dominate, deals to close, an empire to build. She had learned that fairy tales were for children, but power and purpose, those were for women who refused to stay broken. Somewhere in Lagos, Lola scrolled through social media, seeing photos of Adanna at high-profile events, reading articles about the youngest female CEO designate in Nigerian corporate history, watching the life that should have been hers if she had been smart enough to choose genuine friendship over manipulation. Karma, it turned out, wasn't a dramatic explosion. It was simply the universe balancing its books, slowly and thoroughly. Adanna stood at her office window months later, looking out over the city that had witnessed her humiliation and her resurrection. She thought about the bride she had been, hopeful, trusting, in love with the idea of being chosen. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone harder, wiser, infinitely more powerful. She had been broken by betrayal and reforged into something unbreakable. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ngozi. "Dinner tonight? Celebrating your Financial Times profile." Adanna smiled, a real smile this time, untainted by performance or pretense. She had lost a husband and a best friend, but gained a sister and a kingdom. The math worked in her favor. Good hearts don't finish last. Betrayal does. If you believe karma always comes back, comment "strong woman like this story" to support more powerful women. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story.